Trump won't stop talking about this glorious ceasefire, about how he's ending 9, 8, 10 wars, something like that. But Netanyahu is literally flipping him off right in front of his face each and every day, striking Gaza, blowing up homes in Gaza, claiming that the Palestinians are doing attacks in Gaza on IDF personnel, but that's actually not happening. The Israelis said they were going to bring in 6,600 aid trucks, but they've only brought in 983 aid trucks. This is the biggest clown moment, the biggest negative 5,000 aura moment of Trump's entire life. And I don't think that he even understands what's going on. And if he does, he's too fearful to do anything about it. President Trump just got one step closer to giving Benjamin Netanyahu everything he wants with regard to U.S. posturing in the Middle East. Netanyahu, obviously, he wants nothing more than a war in Iran, and he wants U.S. participation in that. He kind of got it for 12 days. He got the U.S. to participate in this, but of course that came to a close, and now he's got to deal with this Gaza ceasefire. He's got to deal with his re-election bid. So things are not looking great for Netanyahu right now. Also, the prospects of another war with Iran really also not great because of how much Russia has been supplying Iran with military equipment. So this is like a pretty bad situation for Netanyahu. Also, the Qatar thing, that wasn't good. Trump came in after Netanyahu did the airstrikes and said, we're going to give Qatar Article 5 NATO protection equivalent, basically, because he was so angry that Netanyahu did the strikes on the Palestinian leadership inside of Qatar in Doha, Qatar. And, now we seem to be taking a step back in the direction. Trump seems to be taking a step back in the direction that Netanyahu would love, okay? Now, this ceasefire, I really think, I don't think Trump really cares about what's going on, if there's peace, if there's war. I think this was of a vanity project for Trump as he was trying to get his Nobel Peace Prize. Obviously, that didn't work out. But now, after the Nobel Peace Prize came and went and Trump didn't get it, he started to change his tune a little bit with regard to Gaza, the nature of how secure this ceasefire is going to be. This is what he had to say yesterday when discussing the future of the ceasefire.
Yeah, just following up on that question, when you say we are going to eradicate Hamas, who is we? Does that include American boots on the ground?
No, it won't be on the ground at all. We don't need to because we have many countries, as you know, signed on to this deal. The way I view it, 59 countries. And unanimous. There's never been, nobody ever believed it was right. Countries that 4 months ago didn't like each other, and now they're all aligned together. We've had countries calling me when they saw some of the killing with Hamas, saying, we'd love to go in and take care of the situation ourselves. In addition, you have Israel would go in 2 minutes if I asked him to go in. I could tell him, go in and take care of it. But right now, we haven't said that. We're going to give it a little chance, and hopefully there will be a little less violence. But right now, they're violent people. Hamas has been very violent. But they don't have the backing of Iran anymore. They don't have the backing of really anybody anymore. They have to be good. And if they're not good, they'll be eradicated.
And if they won't be good, they'll be eradicated. Now, there's a few things I want to break down in that clip. First of all, he said that if Hamas starts acting up again, they get all uppity once more, then we are going to have our allies go in and restore order. Now, there's been literally 0 instances of the Palestinians getting uppity, as Trump is putting it, right? One would have to question, though, who are those allies? Who's going to be going in? Egypt? Turkey? Turkey's a signatory on this deal. They are a major reason why this deal happened. Who's going to be going into Gaza to restore order? Because I guarantee you, Israel's not going to allow Turkey to send their military in. Israel's not going to allow Egypt to send their military. What do we think is going to happen here? What BS is Trump being fed right now? The only ally that is going to be allowed to go inside of Gaza is Israel. That is the one and only ally of the United States that will be allowed to go. And if that happens, that is a complete abandonment of the ceasefire. Okay. Now, he doubled down on this in a post that he made on Truth Social. He said, let me see if I can find it here. He said, numerous of our now great allies in the Middle East and areas surrounding the Middle East have explicitly and strongly, with great enthusiasm, informed me that they would welcome the opportunity at my request to go into Gaza with a heavy force and straighten out the Palestinians if they continue to act badly. Okay, so really no clarity on this. The only militaries that are going to be allowed into Gaza, I guess, are the United States, Israel. The UK is even questionable at this point, given the fact that they're being painted as, anti-Israel because they said they were going to recognize Palestinian statehood, which literally means nothing. But there you go. You have that right there. In my eyes, that is one step closer to not only destroying this whole ceasefire deal, but also it is one step closer for the U.S. to actually participate in some sort of boots on the ground operation, security operation inside of Gaza. Now, I actually don't think that this is a good idea for Israel to allow any foreign troops into Gaza. I obviously don't think they're going to allow their enemies, U.S. allies, but enemies into Gaza, because then they would see the untold horror. They'd be able to film it and they'd be able to share it with the rest of the world. But obviously, I don't think they would allow U.S. troops to go in because, well, we can't allow another scenario like Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar, U.S. veteran, Green Beret, who actually did get to go into Gaza and saw all of the madness with his own eyes and has now become one of the most vocal critics of what the U.S. humanitarian operation was actually doing there and what Israel has done there over the past 2 years. Okay, so I don't think this is really a good idea even for Israel. But I say this is one step closer to the ceasefire being completely nuked. It basically already is completely nuked. I mean, let's just go through the facts here. Since the ceasefire began on October 10th, there have been over 100 Palestinians killed in Gaza by Israeli air attacks and shootings, which is obviously in complete violation of the deal. This is far worse than the violations that we've seen by Israel on the Lebanese border and on the country of Lebanon. You have just in a few days, 11 days, you have 100 Palestinians who've been killed by Israel, which just goes to show that this really is not a ceasefire deal and Trump has no intent of actually upholding the deal. Now, part of the reason why there were these series of major airstrikes on Rafah over the past week and why you had, Smotrich tweeting out the call for war, you had Ben Gvir saying we need to have war, was because of a security incident which occurred pretty far back in Israeli-controlled territory, and Israel blamed this on the Palestinians. I think this was a false flag. I think that this maybe was some sort of an IDF accident. Maybe they had placed an IED somewhere, they forgot about it, and boom, they had a mistake, and then they blamed it on the Palestinians to first of all, cover up the fact that their own incompetence led to a loss of life in the IDF once more, but also so they could justify further strikes on the Palestinian people in Rafah. Ryan Grimm did an interesting and detailed breakdown of exactly what took place here, so take a listen to this.
Violence in Rafah. We've got a map here of the site in question, so walk us through your observations.
Yeah, so on Sunday, the IDF reported that there had been an RPG attack right here if you look at the screen there at what used to be the Rafah airport. It's still called the Rafah airport. It hasn't operated in some time now. They also said that some snipers had come out, that the IDF was trying to clear a tunnel and that some fighters may have been hiding out in this tunnel. But what's important for people to understand when they look at this map here is look how far behind enemy lines this Rafah airport is. So you have IDF positions right nearby. You have absolute moonscape rubble as far as the eye can see. And you don't have a tunnel network that connects to the rest of Gaza from there. So there are two possibilities here if the IDF story is accurate. Either some Hamas fighters managed to somehow sneak through this rubble for many kilometers, get behind the enemy lines, and then launch an ambush, or that just days after agreeing to a ceasefire, or they've been hiding out in this tunnel for 8 months at this point, because the IDF has controlled this area for roughly 8 months at this point. How they would be provisioned, food and water. So those are the two credible possibilities. Now, what I was told by a source familiar with this situation is that shortly after this happened, the Americans had intelligence that what happened was that a bulldozer that was operated by a kind of settler company that is destroying homes in Rafah, the homes that remain standing, had run over either unexploded ordnance or some type of improvised explosive device that had not detonated during the fighting that had taken place in Rafah many months ago, and that the United States then relayed to Israel that they had this intel, that this is what had happened, that we know there's enormous amount, there are IEDs and there's enormous amount of unexploded ordnance from shells in particular, but also from bombs dropped from the sky that hasn't blown up, and when a bulldozer runs over that, it might blow up, and that's what happened. And
well, hold on, I want to draw a fine point on that, Ryan, because if that's true, it would seem to suggest that White House officials believe Israel has lied to them. Is that what you're reporting?
Yes, that's what they believe. And when they conveyed to them that they knew what had happened, if you notice, shortly after that, Netanyahu said that he was opening the crossings back up. Is what he said. He said, all right, because of this attack, we are closing, just like they did on March 2nd, we're closing all of the crossings, and no food, no medicine, nothing is getting in.
There you go. They basically use this incident, the security incident, which resulted in several IDF soldiers being unalived, to justify not only strikes on Gaza, on Rafah, but also the cessation of the entry of aid into Gaza, which was already not really entering in any large amount. And this was in part due to the fact that Israelis are literally protesting, blocking Gaza aid trucks from entering into Gaza. They're using baby strollers to block trucks from entering. They're using, their own bodies and baby strollers. It is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I don't know if there's a baby in that or what the deal is. But not too long after this took place, Israel resumed strikes on Gaza. They claimed that the Palestinians were responsible for the ceasefire violations, but obviously that could not have been true based on where they actually took place. They won't tell you that on the mainstream media. Okay? And now Israel has said, okay, we did what we wanted to do. We launched our strikes on Rafah. We targeted more civilians, more babies, more innocent mothers, men, women, children. Now we're going to go back to the ceasefire. They still haven't allowed for the entry of aid once more, but they said we're going to begin to slowly go back to the ceasefire. And what they mean by that is they're going to continue doing stuff like this. This was recorded yesterday in Rafah. They are demolishing homes in the red zone, despite having said that they're going to go back to the ceasefire after conducting airstrikes in Rafah already. So just blowing up empty homes, presumably for fun, before they, again, go back to the ceasefire, whatever that means. Now, there are some people who are very upset with the idea of going back to the ceasefire. Ben Gvir is one of them. He said that this is a shameful retreat by Netanyahu's office, which announced the suspension of aid to Gaza until further notice, only to reverse its decision 2 hours later. But they said that they're going to be going back, I think, by like Monday or something, to the entry of aid. But here are the stats with regard to aid being actually allowed into Gaza. There have only been 986 aid trucks which have been allowed to enter Gaza since the ceasefire began 11 days ago. This is far below the what was predetermined, the agreed upon amount in the ceasefire deal, which should have been allowed into Gaza by now, which was 6,600 trucks. Okay? They've allowed in 986. They were supposed to have brought in 6,600 trucks by now. And people still will blame the Palestinians for violating the deal, even though they've literally done nothing. And by the way, this happened in the last ceasefire deal back in January. I had all of these idiots, even Chris Cuomo, who tries to act like this neutral arbiter. And he attacked me because I said that, well, no, it's actually the Israelis that are not fulfilling their end of the ceasefire deal that they signed off on, they agreed to. And he said, well, how could that be true? How could that no, everyone, the ones that are not agreeing and upholding the ceasefire deal are the Palestinians. And I said, well, they said they were going to bring in this many trucks by this date. They've brought in far less. They said they were going to bring in this many tents. They brought in far less. This many mobile homes. They brought in far less, so on and so forth. Israel refuses to respect any of these deals. So for Gvir to come out and say these things, really, it's meaningless because they're already not respecting the deal. Gvir also went out and said, now that we have the hostages, we must return to war and open the gates of hell in Gaza. And this is what I'm really worried about. Also, we saw that Smotrich tweeted this out. He said, war, in all caps. This is what I am really worried about. Just a few days ago, this was, I think 6 days ago, you had Smotrich go out and say, there will be Jewish settlement in Gaza. Okay, so this was a speech he gave, 6 days ago. So this tweet was 2 days ago. In Sterdot, he said that there will be a colonization of Gaza. Now, yes, I am worried about this. I'm worried about the fact, well, now that the hostages are freed, there's nothing that the Palestinians have any leverage over the Israelis on. And of course, we want to be clear for YouTube community guidelines. We support innocent civilians being unimpacted by the war on all sides. We'll say that. But the truth is, it's like, well, now there's absolutely no limits, no red lines for what the Israelis can do in Gaza. Previously, the Israelis said, well, we have to be careful because there are hostages there, even though they did accidentally, they claim accidentally, they accidentally target their own hostages who are in Gaza. Even Noah Argamani came out and said as much, that I think 2 of the hostages that she was with at one point in Gaza were actually unalived by Israel in these strikes. But the truth is that I don't think they really cared about the hostages. I think they cared about the public sentiment in Israel before these elections, in the midst of all the other legal crises that Netanyahu is facing and his wife is facing, because a lot of the people in Israel are not necessarily upset and they weren't protesting in such large numbers because they were so horrified by what was going on in Gaza, but because they wanted the hostages home and because they realized that the absolutely indiscriminate bombings of Gaza put their own family members and friends who are hostages in Gaza, put their lives at risk. So that was the main concern there. Now there's no concern whatsoever besides a very small group of people in Israel who are still horrified by what they're witnessing inside of Gaza. Okay. So ceasefire deal, can't really call it that. Trump is being made a fool. He looks like a complete clown on the world stage. As an American, I say Trump looks like the biggest clown in the world right now because he won't stop talking about this glorious ceasefire, about how he's ending 9, 8, 10 wars, something like that. But Netanyahu is literally flipping him off right in front of his face with each and every day striking Gaza, blowing up homes in Gaza, claiming that the Palestinians are doing attacks in Gaza on IDF personnel, but that's actually not happening. The Israelis said they were going to bring in 6,600 aid trucks, but they've only brought in 983 aid trucks. This is the biggest clown moment, the biggest negative 5,000 aura moment of Trump's entire life. And I don't think that he even understands what's going on. And if he does, he's too fearful to do anything about it.